Today, on Fish Memoirs, we're diving into the story of one of the most influential countries in history. A country you can literally walk across in half an hour, where people wear extravagant outfits and suffer through the summer heat. We're talking about the nation with more art and culture per square meter than anywhere else on Earth, and home to the stunning Sistine Chapel, the Vatican. And yes, my friends, believe it or not, Vatican City is a country. In fact, it's the smallest sovereign state in the world, both in area and population. Its government is technically a theocracy, but in practice, it's really an absolute monarchy, the last one in Europe, ruled today by Pope Leo XIV, who succeeded Pope Francis after his passing in 2025. As you probably know, the Vatican is the most important place on earth for the Catholic Church because it's where the Holy See resides. But don't mix them up. The Vatican and the Holy See are not the same thing. The Vatican refers to the territory, while the Holy See is the institution, the one that actually signs treaties and maintains diplomatic relations with other countries. So yeah, governments make agreements with the Holy See, while tourists go to visit the Vatican. Got it? Alright then, let's get to the point. What on earth is a mini country like this still doing inside Italy today? To answer that question, we have to travel way back in time, more than 6 centuries before Christ, to the days of the Etruscans. The very name Vatican actually comes from the Latin word vaticinium, meaning prophecy or prediction. That's because Vatican Hill, one of Rome's famous 7 hills, was once home to an Etruscan oracle. Now the truth is, this area wasn't exactly prime real estate. Being so close to the river, it was damp, swampy, and generally unpleasant. But during the 1st century AD, Agrippina the Elder, daughter of Emperor Augustus, decided to drain the area and build lush gardens there. Later, Emperor Nero himself turned a part of that space into his own private circus, basically an arena for entertainment, and that massive Egyptian obelisk, standing today in St. Peter's Square. It was originally brought to Rome by Caligula just to decorate Nero's circus, and well, that's where things get dark. As many of you might remember, Nero, the last of the Julio-Claudian emperors, was notorious for his brutal persecution of Christians. It was right there, in this very circus, that many of them were executed, including, according to tradition, Saint Peter himself. They say Peter was martyred in Nero's circus and later buried in a tomb directly beneath what would become St. Peter's Basilica. Now, of course, some parts of that story might be more legend than fact, but come on, it's too good of a tale not to tell. From that point on, the area would remain mostly forgotten by Christianity, until the arrival of Emperor Constantine the Great, the first Christian emperor of Rome. Under his rule, not only was the grand city of Constantinople founded, but the most important Christian holy sites were also expanded and honored. In the year 318, Constantine ordered the construction of the old St. Peter's Basilica, a place that would soon become a major pilgrimage site for Christians around the world. Now, let's make another massive leap through time, jumping all the way from the Roman Empire to the early Middle Ages, about 2 centuries after Rome had collapsed. At that point, when Europe's kingdoms were still forming, northern Italy was home to a rather rowdy bunch known as the Lombards. These guys had managed to snatch up lands that included the city of Rome, and therefore the Vatican, from their rightful owners, the emperors of the Eastern Roman Empire, or the Byzantine Empire. Those Byzantine territories, part of a region called the Exarchate of Ravenna, ended up in the hands of a Lombard king named Aistulf, who, by the way, was a pagan. Naturally, this didn't sit well with the Pope. Even though the Vatican as a state didn't yet exist, Rome itself was absolutely vital for the Church. So the Pope turned to the Franks for help, specifically to Pepin the Short, son of Charles Martel and father of Charlemagne. Pepin agreed to fight the Lombards and promised to hand the conquered territories over to the Pope in exchange for the Church's favor, a mission that his son, Charlemagne, eventually completed. And it was with Charlemagne that things truly changed. The Pope broke ties with the Byzantine Empire and crowned Charlemagne as Emperor of the West. In return, the Franks granted the papacy several territories in Italy in the year 756, lands that the popes would rule for more than 1,000 years. At their peak, these papal states covered the regions of Lazio, Marche, Umbria, and Emilia-Romagna. And that, my friends, is how the Papal States were born. Real territories ruled directly by the popes from the Lateran Palace and later from the Quirinal Palace. Throughout the Middle Ages, these states expanded and shrank over time, depending on wars, politics, and shifting alliances. The popes weren't just spiritual leaders anymore. They had become political rulers in every sense of the word. However, with the arrival of humanism, the Renaissance, and later the Protestant Reformation, everything was about to change. The Church began to lose political power, and with it, much of its territory. Still, this period gave birth to some of the greatest artistic treasures in history, the masterpieces that now fill the walls of the Vatican museums, and of course, the construction of the monumental St. Peter's Basilica, designed under the genius of Michelangelo, Bramante, and Bernini. And by the way, let's clear up a common mistake. St. Peter's Basilica isn't actually a cathedral. The real Cathedral of Rome is the Archbasilica of St. John Lateran. But all good things must come to an end. With another kind of Renaissance, the Italian Risorgimento of the 19th century, the political map of Italy changed completely. The Italian nationalists dreamed of uniting all territories under one state, but the Papal States stood right in the way of that goal. So, in 1870, during the Franco-Prussian War, Italian troops took control of Rome, the capital of the Papal States, and Pope Pius IX declared himself a prisoner in the Vatican. Quite a situation, to say the least. With that, the Papal States ceased to exist as an independent political entity and became part of the newly unified Kingdom of Italy, with Rome as its capital. The Pope retained his spiritual authority, but lost all territorial power. So yes, Rome became both the historical heart of Italy and the spiritual heart of Catholicism, two identities that had coexisted for centuries, now finally fused together. It wasn't until 1929, under Pope Pius XI, that the long conflict was finally resolved. The dictator Benito Mussolini signed the Lateran Pacts, an agreement between the Holy See and the Italian government that ended decades of disputes and officially established the sovereignty of Vatican City, the tiny independent state we know today. And so, the Vatican became a fully independent state, with its own banking system, newspaper, telephone network, and of course, millions of tourists every year eager to see some of the most priceless and perfectly preserved works of art on Earth. But because of its peculiar status as an enclave state, the Vatican also hides some fascinating quirks. For example, did you know there are no prisons in Vatican City? And yet, it technically has one of the highest crime rates in the world. Sounds impossible, right? Well, it's true. That's because the crimes are counted per capita, and with millions of visitors passing through, even a bit of pickpocketing or shoplifting sends the statistics through the roof. There are no hospitals either, nor maternity wards, which means no one can be born a citizen of the Vatican. Citizenship is granted only to those who work directly for the Holy See. Also, while Italian is the official language of Vatican City, the official language of the Holy See is still Latin. In fact, you can even find ATMs with instructions written entirely in Latin. And here's a fun one to end with. The Vatican is the only country in the world whose entire territory has been declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And that's all for today. We hope you enjoyed this journey through the history, mysteries, and peculiarities of the smallest and perhaps most unique country on Earth, Vatican City. You know the drill. If you enjoyed the story, give it a like, hit subscribe, and dive in for the next one.